All right. Thank you all again for joining us today with the International Association of Woodcarvers. Today we are on site in Hickory, North Carolina with Dwayne Gosnell. We'll join Dwayne here in a few minutes. He's going to talk to us about study sticks and casting study sticks. So we'll talk to him in just a few minutes. Before we get started, I wanted to say a few things. I want to thank all of you all again who go out on our Buy Us a Coffee page and donate to this organization. We use that money to try to continue these meetings each week. So thank you all for donating on there. If anybody's looking for that link, you can go out on the YouTube page. The link will be there under our main page, and probably linked also in this video once we post it this afternoon. So again, it's Buy Us a Coffee if you want to donate. Make sure if you're going out on YouTube that you like and subscribe our channel. I know a lot of people's not able to join these meetings each week, and so if you can't, we post them out on YouTube in the evenings, so people can go back and watch or rewatch. If there's something that we're showing on a particular day and you want to go back and watch how the carver did that, we make those available to you so that you can go back and watch those. So make sure you take advantage of that. I wanted to tell you a few things about classes that are coming up soon. Again, Dave Stetson just posted that he's going to be doing a sitting caricature class coming up. I think it starts in late April, so make sure if you're interested in taking that class, you reach out to Dave. Kevin Applegate's doing ongoing classes. Janet Cordell, who's going to be presenting with us in a couple of weeks, she's doing a class on a female bust. Ryan Olson is getting ready to start his hot tub class. I think he's going to be doing some other classes in the future. Dwayne Gosnell, who again is here with me in Hickory today, we're at his house. He's doing a pirate class that's coming up. So make sure if you're interested in that class that you reach out to Dwayne, get signed up for that. He can give you all the details. He'll be talking about that again here in a little bit when he comes on. Del Green will be doing a class on a caricature on a guy named Boomer that's sitting on a gas can. And Bob Hershey's going to be doing a surfing frog. So take advantage of all those classes if you get a chance, or all those opportunities. Again, a couple other people that we have Chris Hammock that's doing ongoing classes. He posted some stuff this week, and I posted that out on our Facebook page. So go out and check what Chris is offering. And Alec Lacoste is doing ongoing cottonwood bark classes. So if you're interested in cottonwood bark, check with Alec. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Dwayne Gosnell, the newest CCA member, is with us today. He's going to be talking about study sticks and casting. He's been doing some casting and some carvings. He's going to tell us about all of that. He's actually going to do a live carving of the study stick. One of the things that we wanted to announce today, we're also going to do a little bit of a fundraiser during this meeting. The study stick that Dwayne's going to be carving, we're going to do a silent auction on that. So if anybody wants to participate in the silent auction, go in the chat and bid on that. I don't think there's going to be a starting bid, but whoever wants to kick it off can kick it off with the starting bid. At the end of the meeting, the person who bids the highest will win the study stick, and all of that money he is going to donate to the International Association of Woodcarvers again, so that we can keep these meetings going. So Dwayne, thank you for that. Thank you for participating. Thanks for your support and donating the money to go to these meetings. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dwayne. Again, we're at Dwayne's house, so thanks for hosting us today. And we'll let him talk to you about what he has going on and talk to us about the study sticks. Thanks, Dwayne.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
All right. As Blake said, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about the castings, the benefits of castings, and how I go about a casting. So in the event, that I do not get finished with what we do in the time allotted, I will finish this. And whoever wins the highest bid, I will get with Blake, and I'll either finish this up, I'll seal it, so it's not going to ship out today. So if you look at this and see, well, he only did this, I will finish a complete study stick, and this whole thing here will be filled up with stuff that you can look at and kind of take and use it in what you do, or just maybe it's a collector's piece that you just throw up on a shelf, or it may be good firewood. It's up to you. If you win, you can do with it whatever you choose. But all that money will go back to the International Association of Woodcarvers for their fees and stuff that they they take on. Like Blake drove 3 hours down here today to come here, so it's a little bit of a trip for him. So I do want to thank him, and so we'll start right into it. But I do want to let you know, if we don't get done with the carving, then we will. I will finish it up, and whoever wins, I will ship it out to them, and it'll be finished, ready to go. One of the things I do want to talk about is what is my study sticks versus what is other people's study sticks. I only am going to speak about the study sticks that I have done or I own the rights to. And what I mean by that is, I don't know what screen they've got me on. It may be the computer screen. Can he flip it to my Dwayne Gosnell's iPhone screen? Okay. This is the Bishop Expression Study Stick, and what it is it's a series of different faces that the Bishops created. I now own the rights to cast these and sell them. So this is one of the ones that the Bishops came up with. We'll set it down there. The other one that the Bishops came up with is what they call a closed hand. It's 5 steps in different series of progression of carving a closed hand, or a fist, if you will. And then you get to the finished carving, which is right here. They also have an open study stick, which again is the progression of carving a hand in the open position. The detail is not showing up. There we go. There's some more detail. And then we'll flip it over here and let it readjust. So that is the closed hands. Move these out of the way. These are study sticks that I have created. They're little, I guess, 6-inch deals. Let me measure them here. 5-inch. 5-inch study sticks. These come in a set that I provide. It's carving a mouth, an ear, and an eye. And I'll set these down here. And then this is the newest study stick that we have, or that I have came up with. It is a guy's hand holding a study stick. So you're getting ears, you're getting a nose, you're getting an eye, and you're getting a little hair texture here on the back side. I'll let that zoom in just a second there. But it is a hand holding a study stick. Now, before we talk about how to make them or how I go about processing them, I want to show you a few things. With a study stick, for example, on this one here, the good thing about a study stick is they're made out of cast resin, and I can actually lay the tool down in this study stick, and I can kind of come up with how this forms from the tool. So when I go to my carving, so you're not just staring at these sticks. You can actually lay the tool in here, and you can kind of come up with which tool I used depending on which tool or tool mark is made. For example, this was a number 7 5/8 that scooped that ear out. When you get down here to where we're creating that, I believe it's called a targus in there, then you can see exactly how that tool fits in there. So these are not just looking at it as a 3-dimensional object on a flat surface. You can actually kind of come up with how this is done by laying these in here. Obviously, if you so choose to, you can carve this stuff. It's a hard plastic, okay? I wouldn't recommend doing it. So when you're laying those tools in there, I wouldn't be forcing them in, because you're then going to change the direction. But a lot of people have a misunderstanding that a study stick is just something you look at. Even in these carvings here, you can see which tool they used in creating these cuts in here. For example, you can lay that gouge right in there and say, well, that wasn't a number 5. That was obviously a number 9. So they're very useful in that. I'm not going to bore you guys to tears with the process, but study sticks are unique. You can cast almost anything, but there is some limitations as to what you can do. There is some limitations as to what I would or would not do as far as a casting. And what I mean by that is if I had something along the lines of, just a random carving, this is not a good material to recast duplications. The reason being is you have a ton of through points, and it's just going to be a casting nightmare to unmold these each and every time. So something like this, I would not recommend if you had a great carving and you thought, hey, I'm going to, send this off to a casting, company and have a bunch of these made. Something like this is going to cost you a ton of money because of the amount of work that the manufacturer is going to have to do to cast it. I cast my own. I don't have to send them out. But in the event that that's something you may want to do in the future, just keep that in mind, that the more detail or the more complex it is, the harder it is to generate a pattern from it. Whereas something like this guy, it has a ton of detail in it. Let's zoom in there. And you have to overlook the creepy eyes because the eyes are the only thing painted right now. But if you look at the back of this, it has a relatively flat surface. So if I was molding this, I would create this in a position to where I would mount it on the form, and then I would pour the casting resin over it. It's got to be on a level surface because when you flip the mold over and you start making your castings, you could remove this from the mold relatively simple. But if it's three-dimensional, there's a lot more work that's involved on that. So these are, the hands are cast in a three-dimensional format. They're in a mold where each individual mold is a hand that is up in the air. So when the molding or when the casting material is poured in, there's some tricks that go into removing each one of those molds. So if you're ever looking at buying a casting, and for example, if you look at something like this, there's several factors that come into play when you're purchasing a casting. And I'm not the only one that sells castings. There's a lot of wonderful castings out there. I have a vast collection of castings, study sticks, whatever you call it, that I've collected from other people. I didn't collect those to say, oh, hey, how can I do mine? I collected those because I actually genuinely use them. Skylar Johnson has some old castings out there. Harold Enlow, Dylan Goodson has some great castings out there. We've all seen the Chris Hammock bottle stoppers. Those are all castings. But the castings that I typically collect outside of Chris Hammock's bottle stoppers are the study stick castings, and that's what I spoke of earlier. Dylan Goodson's got a wonderful casting out there, and if you contact Dylan, I'm sure he will fix you up with one of those. It's on a realistic eye. The other ones, I don't, I'm not downplaying them, but some of them are a little bit harder to find. I know that Wood Carving Illustrated had done a series or a run of Harold Enlow's newer castings, came out about, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. So those are still readily available. But some of the Enlow study sticks, they're getting harder to come by, but they are out there. So keep your eyes peeled for them. And I'm talking about the older ones, like the female faces and things of that nature. Pete LeClaire had some castings out there years ago that were wonderful. I've got 2 or 3 of those. So there's castings everywhere. Castings come in a variety of colors, shapes. But before I get off topic, size does not necessarily dictate price when you're buying a casting. A lot of it has to do with how much mold material is put into it. With that being said, there's as many ways to cast something as there is products you can use for casting. What I would recommend, if it's something that you're interested in doing yourself, I'm going to honestly tell you, you absolutely can do it, but you can't do it with a knife and a block of wood. So you're not going to be able to go into casting for a $20 or $30 startup fee like you can carving. So that's where we come back into where I've made a lot of study sticks out of the wood. So not only were they getting an original piece, so to speak, but each one of these had to be made individually. So there's going to be tiny variances between them. If one was to choose to go into casting, I would say on the conservative end, you're talking about a $400 to $500 startup fee, and that's before you have your product made. A gallon of some of the cheapest resin out there is a 2-part resin, is about $100 before shipping, and you're shipping 16 pounds. So depending on where you're getting it from, not all casting is created equal, and I'm not going to mention any names because obviously they're not sponsoring the International Association of Wood Carvers. So I'll let you choose your own. Now, if Blake tells me that, hey, this company is going here, we would talk about it. But there's a lot of stuff out there. Some of it's better than others. Do your research on the casting material. There's color variations. There's solid black, but I wouldn't recommend casting anything in a solid black material because you're going to lose all of your shadow points in doing so. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to need a gazillion, and that's a true number, of measuring cups. I don't do anything by weight. I do it by Dixie cups, those little bitty disposable Dixie cups, because they're 4 ounces, and that's a good way for me to measure it up when I'm measuring 50-50. And then I pour that into a 16-ounce solo cup, and I think I've probably got about 2,500 cups on hand right now, because when you buy them from a big box store that doesn't sponsor us, we're not going to mention their name. You get them cheaper in gross than you do going to the bonfire and saving everybody's plastic cups to bring them back home to mix up your casting resin in. The other thing is the casting is very temperamental. And what I mean by that is you have to keep the resin inside. It's got to be room temperature. Anything below 50 degrees, it tells you a 30-minute drying time. If it's around the 50-degree mark, you're looking at about a 2-hour drying time. So in the winter months, regardless of where you are, unless you're from Florida or Arizona or something like that, the weather's always going to affect you. The other thing that affects you, and me being fortunate and the sarcastic comments coming, we don't have a whole lot of humidity here in North Carolina. That was the sarcastic comment. But resin does not like humidity and or water on any level. It will not cure. So you have to have dry molds, less humidity. So the best time to cast is fall and spring. So you have to take those into factors. If it's raining outside your shop and you're just feeling wet and gross because it's a cloudy, overcast day, you're not going to get a 30-minute turnaround time on your drying time. You're going to get something around 2 to 3 hours. I'm not talking anybody out of casting. I'm not talking anybody into casting. I just thought it would be kind of fun because, I've not heard anybody. And when Blake presented me with this opportunity, I said, yeah, those who know me know I can run my mouth about, eggshells. If we want to talk about eggshells next week, we can talk about that. But casting is, it's definitely has its advantages. It also has its huge fun stuff because you're going to start thinking outside the box when you're doing these cuts. But there is a little bit of homework to do. You can't just say, hey, I need to go pour some castings. I get emails all the time. Hey, you're out of castings. And I say, yeah, well, I live down here where it's really super dry and hasn't rained for the last 3 weeks in a row. As soon as that stops, we'll get some more castings in. So, just check the website if you are wanting to look at a couple of castings. I think I offer 5. The newest one, which is not available, is this guy here. I've only got, I think, 2 or 3 of these cast up. Now, with the castings, let me back up to molds. The mold setup is really, it's the most expensive part. You can buy $100 gallon of the casting material and it's $100. The mold making material is like $30 for an ounce, or for like 2 or 3 ounces. For example, oh, we switched videos. For example, something like this that takes, I think this one takes 15 ounces of resin to make. It took about 29 ounces of mold material to make. So the molds, they do last quite a while, but they're pretty expensive to make a mold. And with a casting, you can get a piece in 30 minutes. With a mold, you need 24 hours of cure time in that non-humidity, non-wet, above 70-degree weather. And then we'll talk about 1 or 2 more things here real quick, and then we'll get into doing a little bit of carving, and maybe we'll open it up for questions before the carving, just in case anybody has a specific question. The other thing I want to talk about is a pressure pot. You have to have a way to get the air bubbles out of these castings. A lot of material will tell you low air intake, low bubbles, pour slower. Well, if you've got a 30-minute casting time and I spend 15 minutes pouring it in to try to get all the bubbles out, you're still not going to get them all out. So you need some sort of either a decompression pot or a compression pot. One of them removes air out, which pulls the bubbles out, but also a pressure pot forces pressure into it, which causes the liquid to, I guess the word is coagulate upon itself, and it pushes the air bubbles out of the mold. You know, if you ever get a mold out there that looks like it's a sponge, that means it was a poured mold versus a pressurized mold. And some of that can really take away from the fine detail, especially in like eyes or hands or things of that nature. You don't want a bubble on your carving there, because it's going to lose all that crisp detail in there. You know, your biggest expense is going to be your pressure pot. You can get a small 5-gallon pressure pot for around $300 up to hundreds of dollars, and I think I've even seen some large vat type for thousands of dollars. So it all depends on how big you want to get into it. So with that being said, I know that's kind of listening to paint dry as I was discussing that, but the main benefit that I wanted to talk to everyone about is it's not just a visual reference. You can use those tools in there to see what the artist who created it, how those angles line up. When you're looking at this and you say, well, you know, I see that he's used obviously a V tool, but when you lay that tool in there and you can see that it's actually at an upward angle, not straight in. That's the key component in creating what the artist is trying to do versus just looking at this, because I can look at my own eye in a mirror, but I can't carve my own eye. And I'm dang sure not going to stick a V tool up in the, you know, in my eyelid to see what angle that follows, because, you know, some people say that's not smart. So if you want to open it up, or if anybody has any questions that I may have not covered, then by all means, let's hear them now.
You mentioned right off the bat, Dwayne, about the bishops. What are the bishops? Or who are the bishops?
The bishops are Phil and Vicky Bishop. They are from Oklahoma. They had they traveled 48 out of 52 weeks a year. They had an extensive rough out collection, and some of the best caricature carvers, best people that you could absolutely meet. Both of them are wonderful instructors. They came up with these castings, and I also own the rights to all of their rough outs. I didn't just wake up one day and start owning 200 rough outs patterns. I bought their rights to continue those rough outs throughout the future, because, you know, without them, some of these artists who created this stuff, their legacy kind of disappears once they're gone. Because let's say hypothetically, and I'll use myself as example, once I'm gone, if I don't allow someone permission to take these over, no one can then claim the copyright of it. My wife could probably give permission, but that's kind of a handshake and a smile. So, you know, I've actually got the rights to continue them on. But who the Bishops are, they were wood carving instructors. Both of them were in the Caricature Carvers of America. If you want to get a really good representation of some of the work they've done, you can definitely visit my website. It'll tell you whether it's a bishop, or you can actually just Google their name under images, and you're going to get a lot more images. I mean, you're going to get pages upon pages of images. They were just two of the most creative people that I've been fortunate enough to meet over the years in wood carving.
Hey,
Awesome, thanks.
do you use a mold release or any type of thing when you're using the mold that's like the mold release?
Yeah, I do. There's I forget the name of it. And again, you know, we're not going to name a specific brand or company, but there is a mold release. It's a silicone spray. And when you get it on your hands, they're just smooth all day long. So, but you can't get that mess off either. But you typically have to pour a silicone mold release after every 3 castings is what I use. And that extends the life of your molds. And, you know, if you just run the silicone mold and you do casting after casting, you're going to get about 10 or 15 castings. And then they're actually going to start sticking to the silicone. And then you will start ripping up your mold. And obviously a ripped mold means you spend more money having to recreate the mold. So I forgot about that. So that was a good question.
Do you make latex molds? Or just silicone
molds? The only molds that I have used has been the silicone molds. Well, Blake, as y'all know, is live on location, so you're going to have to bear with us just a little bit, because I can't hear you guys through my audio, and I've got 2 screens up here, so I'm listening through Blake's phone. So we apologize about that. But when we've got four units connected here, we had to cut off a lot of the audio. So that's why I've been pausing a little bit to listen to these questions. But to answer your question, I do not use any latex. There's some available. I'm not saying they're better or worse. I've just not used them. So I'm not familiar with it enough to say, you know, it may be the best thing since sliced bread, but I've not used it.
Hey man, Mike Pounder's here.
Hey, Mike.
Do you ever, when you do it, you just have your carving? Do you put anything on your carving before you make a mold out of it?
Oh, absolutely. See, another good question. So y'all know more about this than I've told you so far. Once you get your carving that you're wanting to cast, I will brush on about 3 to 4 layers of a brush on lacquer. I don't use the spray because I can't see where that stuff goes. So I use a spray lacquer, and once it's dry, and before I pour my initial mold, I will spray it as well with the mold release. So a 2-part, I've seen some people paint their carving, and they've painted it with just like a white latex paint. You know, I've seen people use clay to make the master with, but whatever you're using, whether it's the paint, whether it's the clear finish, or whether it's the lacquer or whatever, you're still going to have to spray it with a mold release initially. And, you know, there's there's a bunch of different products out there, but you know, I'm one of those guys that I started with this type of mold. I use the same brand in casting, and I use the same brand in the mold release. It's kind of like, you know, if they're saying, hey, they recommend you use this, I typically kind of lean toward that. You know, it's not like, you know, going and saying, oh, I got a DeWalt screwdriver, but I'm going to use a Stanley bit, you know, so there is a little bit of chemical component in these. And I typically am not one to kind of try mixing and matching when it comes to a chemical that's got all kinds of skulls and crossbones on the side of it when you're mixing it together. So
Is it worth even
the
messing
other
with?
thing I want to touch base, since I mentioned the skull and crossbones, and I'm not trying to offend anybody, but you know, the state of California, it causes a whole bunch of crazy stuff. So that's a big warning on the back of it, and it comes from the state of California. I don't know if they've just got bigger research labs out there or what, but you know, very, very well ventilated. I use exhaust fans, and with the exhaust fans being used, it's also got to have a source to pull from. So that's what I'm talking about. If it's very humid or rainy and you've got an exhaust fan going, it's pulling air from somewhere. So that's kind of where the weather comes in, and it's temperamental. So, you know, it doesn't have an odor, but unfortunately some of that stuff that does not have an odor is the stuff that can get you hurt real quick, as opposed to maybe gas or something, because you're smelling that chemically smell. This stuff almost has no smell, but they tell you, you know, respirators, and again, it may just be the product that I'm using, but definitely read those directions. You know, none of us are guaranteed tomorrow, but I'd hate to know that I popped about 10 years of my life by just being in a hurry and not reading something.
You're not in California either, so you should be okay.
What's that?
You're not in California, so you should.
Yeah.
Is it worth even messing with those kits that you see at some of the hobby stores?
No.
Okay.
The reason being is I've seen those. They want you to cast like your baby's hands and, you know, stuff like that. The issue with those is you're almost guaranteed to not get enough product. And if you go out and you buy one of those kits for $25, you then don't have enough product to probably do, like, let's say, a nice size bottle stopper or something like that, because a good rule of thumb with any product is whatever size you're casting. Let's say you're casting something the size of a baseball. You need a 1/2 inch or more mold around every part of that casting. So you can kind of do the math on a 1/2 inch around a baseball, how much material that's going to use. So a lot of these are, you know, the Precious Moments has a kit out there, I think, and that's why I mentioned the baby hands and stuff like that. I just think for your money, you're going to spend a little bit more, but you're also going to have more to work with by buying it from a manufacturer who deals primarily in the reproduction of it, as opposed to a kit. It's like buying a tool kit. You're going to use 3 tools in there, and the other 3 tools are going to sit in a drawer somewhere. So
You mainly do 1-part molds, or do you ever make 2-part molds?
I haven't done any 2-part molds. What I do is, let's say hypothetically, and we'll do something silly, if he can change my screen to the camera screen. When I made this mold here, this is 1 inch by 1 inch square that I started with. When I made the mold, what I did was I took a 2 inch, because we need a 1/2 inch on each side. I took a 2 inch PVC pipe. I cut the PVC pipe in 2, and I don't cut it in 2 to where it's straight, because you want it to fit together. So if this is my 2 inch PVC pipe, when I cut this 2-inch PVC pipe on the bandsaw, I'm cutting it like this. Now this is just my mold. So then I put a stopper on the bottom of it. I duct tape this thing up so there's no leaking. And on the bottom cap on my original piece of wood, I drilled a hole through the bottom cap to hold this in place. So now I've got a 1/2 inch of circumference all the way around this. After 24 hours, I remove this, which is our PVC pipe. And once I remove the PVC pipe, you have to index this to where when you cut the mold, you're not cutting it on a corner or in a weird spot. So I index the mold to where when I cut this, so my mold is now out of the mold and it's just a piece of blue silicone. The top now becomes the bottom. When I remove my mold, because this is flat on the bottom, it creates a hole down here that you can open up and you pour a 1/2 to 1 inch over your original piece. So when you pull this out, this becomes your base. It now gets flipped upside down. So now I'm going to cut into this in zigzag motions. If you cut a straight line, when you put this back together, it could slip back and forth on its own axis. So you want some sort of back and forth cut down into your pattern. So once that's done and I remove my original wood, I then shoot it again with the silicone molding. I put it back in this, but I also make sure that these zigzag lines are not parallel. So in other words, I want them to come on the opposite side. I will then take rubber bands and wrap around my PVC. So my original casting base becomes a holder. If I'm doing a mold in a silicone cup, like let's say it's a solo cup, after I'm done with my mold, I will remove my silicone mold cup. That's my artist skills for y'all today. And I will then take that silicone mold and I will sink in plaster. I will make another mold around the top of this that almost looks like a giant washer, right? And the way I do that is turn the cup upside down, make me a larger PVC. Once the plaster cures and I cut this solo cup, I now have a mold to slide it into that holds it back together. You can use rubber bands around this, but those the plaster mold holder works a lot better than those rubber bands. And the trick is getting those cuts to where you have sharper edges. Now this one I'm not worried about on my mold itself, but when I'm coming to the mold holder, but when I'm talking about the actual mold, and I apologize, the hole's going to be up here because when you put that down, you flip this upside down. And what I mean by that is everything that you do is reversed on a mold. So if you have, this is the cutaway of a solo cup. And let's say I'm doing a small head, right? And here's its nose and I'm doing a bust. And don't make fun of me, but this is about my drawing ability. So once I do that, I'm pouring at least 1 inch up here. So then when I turn it around and I remove the mold, I'm now filling up the mold from this end. And then here is solid silicone. So that becomes my base. So every mold that you do, you got to keep in mind how it's going to sit. Because if you have a mold that will not sit on a flat surface, let's say you put it in a weird bowl that just kind of wobbles around and you fill that up, you're then going to have to lay that bowl into something because it's got If not, it'll just pour out if it turns over in your casting, your pressurizing pot. I'm sorry. But good question, Mike. Well, okay. All right. With that being said, we're going to start on this. Again, the bidding will start at 1 billion. I'm just kidding. However you want to bid. And honestly, I will cover the shipping on this. So it's not going to be, if you win the bid and it's X number of dollars, you're not going to owe X number of dollars plus $25 in shipping. All right. Whenever they tell me to stop carving, we will stop carving, but you will get, this thing will kind of be like a tattooed sleeve of a biker guy. It's going to be completely covered from one end to the other of just whatever random doodleness that I come up with. I do want to talk a few things, and if there's any chip carvers on here, I don't mean to offend, but if you are a chip carver, this is where you have an advantage if you want to create your own study stick. And what I mean by that is when you do a study stick, it's got to be balanced. If I'm selling you a study stick and my first eye is half the size of my second eye, that makes no sense in a progression. So they all need to be the same thing. So if you see, I started out with a couple of lines equally segmented apart. With that being said, I'm going to start on each one of those segmented lines. So let's start with the progression of a nose. The other thing too is I would also encourage you to make your own study stick, because the reason being is if you get in the habit of creating multiple cuts the same way, that is actually better practice than carving an entire nose. If you just carve the under part of a nose 20 times, you're never going to have to think about that undercut again. You're going to know it each and every time. So with that being said, on the bottom of a nose, I do not cut straight in. I cut slightly downward. I've marked on each side here as well. Let's see if that zooms in. I've marked each side. That's how far I know I go, or that's the depth that I'm going. The host, okay. So cutting slightly downward, honestly, that is the first cut in any study stick that I make of a nose, is that bottom cut. The second one, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'll show you how I do a study stick. I don't carve each nose and carve a little bit each time, because guess what? They're going to change and they will not look consistent. So what I'm going to do is make every cut that I need to make. And you ask yourself, how many steps does it take to make a nose? It takes as many steps as it takes to make a nose based on the way you carve a nose. Some people can say, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and it's good enough. So some people may say, no, it takes me 27 different cuts to make a nose. So what I'm going to do is I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to do 14 steps to a nose, okay? But I'm going to cut every one of those steps. That first step, I'm going to cut every one of them. I know I kind of repeated myself, but in other words, I'm not going to cut this one and then carve a little bit here and then a little bit more here. I'm going to basically skip one every time. And what I'm going to do is, what that's going to do is it's going to help keep me keeping every cut consistent. And you do about 2 or 3 of these just playing around on your own, and you will start carving noses or eyes or ears or mouths in your sleep, because it's repetitive. I've had many conversations with many carvers over the years, and I've actually gotten some heated discussion with some carvers that can out carve me, but they can't out talk me. So with that being said, a lot of people will say, well, Dwayne, you know, practice makes perfect. And I'm like, yeah, it don't, because correct practice makes perfect. You can practice something wrong. All you're doing is building muscle memory on how to do it incorrectly. So you need correct practice. So the second cut is going to be, so see, I skipped down. I'm not carving any more on this one. We'll label him as number 1.
Dwayne, there's a question in the chat asking about
number
the
3,
length of each segment
and so on
between
and
your
so
cuts.
forth. So now what I will do at that point is come in, cut every one of these angles, and Blake's here so he can yell at me in person if I get out of camera, because I'm going to do these relatively quick. All I'm looking for is an upward cut and a slightly downward cut.
Somebody asked the length of the segments.
However small you want to do a face. And what I mean by that, I just skipped an inch because I put a 1/2 inch up here and a 1/2 inch down here. Now, what I like to do when I'm doing a study stick and I have no intention of creating a mold or a casting, I want this to be interesting to the person that buys it. Well, a nose stick may be fun and it may be very vital in practice, but it's not interesting. So when I leave some wood up here, I can carve a whole head on top of this. I can carve an eyebrow, an ear. I can carve a flower. I can carve something else besides just this stick. So, all right. With the size, back to the original question, with me starting out with about a 1x1 here, I'm not going to skip 3 inches because I want this thing to look like we talked about earlier. I want it to be just filled. Now, when I get done, I can very easily come back through here, put some V-tool lines and give you a really good representation of where those faces, separate. But I think when you look at a progression like this, you can already see that there's nothing above this guy here, and then there's something else going on. As this develops, you'll start seeing this fill in, and it will take your eye directly to the tip of that nose relatively easy. So this was number 1. When you flip it to the next bank, don't get and forget. This is where you're going to lose track, because every single time you turn this, the piece you're looking at over here may not be what you have to carve over here. So when I'm done with a step, I won't write the steps in, and that's just a way for me to not accidentally go back and carve something up here. So with that being said, we're going to come up in here like so, and I'm going just above where the nostril flare is going to be. I want to leave a little mound. A quick representation is think of a pyramid. We don't want to carve anything under and toward the tip of the nose. We want the tip of the nose to kind of look like a pyramid where everything is going to flow away from that tip. So now we come back here and we're step 3. With step 3, what I'm going to do is knock off the tip in both directions, and I'm going to cut a slight upward angle on both sides. So now when you go from step 1, here we go, you go to step 1 to step 3, we can see there's one cut followed up with the uppercut, and then now you can clearly see, hey, there's something going on under the nose. So I'm just going to pop these out, and I'm lazy, so I will do one side all the way down, and then I come back, and I'm out of frame there a little bit, and Blake didn't yell at me. He's getting one demerit. And like that. So now we come over here. Laziness always wins. If you ever want something done efficiently, find the laziest person you know. And there's a lot of truth in that, because for me, if I make one cut all the way down through there and then make one cut all the way back up, that's a lot easier than manipulating that knife back and forth 8 or 10 times. So with that being said, find a lazy person. They will tell you how to do something easier every single time. I guess everybody's muted because I know that was a hilarious joke, and I'm probably, there's just laughter everywhere. So there.
Scott Bill called you the mouth of the South.
Yeah, well, tell him I know where he lives and I know where he works.
Hey, man. I mean, that was a knee slapper. I'm just telling you, it's like a Marine thing.
I heard something that he was saying that he wished he would join the Marine Corps. So those of y'all who didn't know, Scott Bill, who's obviously on here, we have an uncle. I have an uncle that he also claims as his uncle as well. So that's why he's mad. I live closer to our uncle. So anyway, so step number 4. I'm gonna go ahead and mark it because step number 3 was the nostril flare. Step number 4, let's put a little bit dramatic or drastic change. I'm gonna come down each side of the nose, and what we're doing there, whoops. So we see this step here, and then we see the step here. It's nothing more than a side cut on each side of that nose. And again, just like the nostril flare, because I only have a couple to do right here, when I flip to this and I've got a ton of them to do, that's when my laziness kicks in. So I'll just literally go down through here, repeating that same angle, pushing my wood up, and then I could come down like so. Same way here. Doesn't matter whether you go up or down. If you do go down with your first cut, don't be heavy-handed. You will cut that nose off like so. And we go to step number 5. Step number 5, it all depends on how you want to do your nose. There's a chip hanging there on this one, so we're going to open it up just a little bit.
You're out of frame.
What's that?
You're out of frame.
Oh, I'm out of frame. Good job, Blake.
Thank you. I have my points back.
All right, so step number 5 is entirely up to you. It's how you develop your nose. What I'm going to do is, I told you on step number 3 that we put the nostril flare and we took the tip of the nose off, but what did I not do on every single step after that? So we have to go back, we have to address the tip of the nose because we want it to be consistent. So it's just a matter of knocking just a couple of those off. Then we'll go back to step number 5. Again, I don't make any cuts in there. And when I say in there, I mean back under the nose. I'm not cutting anything under that nose. Everything is slightly away from the nose. So if this is the tip, every cut goes away from the nose. So step number 5, I'm going to pull out a V tool at this point, and I'm going to pull out a pencil. Whether it's a 1/4 inch, 45, whether it's a 3/8, 30 degree, whatever V tool you use on your noses is the best V tool you can use. What I do, however, is I give me a little bit more marking. We've got the depth of the nose on the original side views. So now what I want to do is, where's that smile line going to go? So I don't need it up here, so I'm going to erase it. If not, I'll put it right there because that's where my pencil line is. So step number 5 is going to be where that smile line comes down. And since I'm doing the right-hand side as you're looking at it, I will transfer over this way. And we need step number 5. And then we'll do step number 5. And I'm out of frame. All I'm doing is marking consistent line. Now, what I'm going to tell myself in step number 5 is from this point here on the side of the nostril flare, I'm going to come down just below the original line that's right through here. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create that triangle out of there. But I'm going to start my V-tool cut just above that nose. if that makes sense. And I hope that's not a, I don't think it's a chip, it's just a reflection. So just to mark a couple of these, I'll show you what I'm talking about. There's the original line for the nose. And then on the other side, there's the original line for the nose. And I'm gonna come just above that and come back to this line that we just created, back to this line we just created. Now I can do that with a knife, but I like doing it with a V-tool because, again, a lazy person is going to be the most effective way. Now, we said nothing cuts in toward the nose. This cut is also 100% the same way. If you notice how that is going to cut straight into the side of my nose, I'm going to lay this V-tool over to the side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from that, and I'm going to come out in that area. I didn't mark this one, but I know where it's going to be. We're on step number 5. It's going to be right there. And again, because I'm super lazy, I'm going to go ahead and do every one of these up the side right through here. Again, my V-tool is laid over on its side, not cutting directly in toward the nose. Like so. And you ask yourself, well, Dwayne, how far do I go up into that side of that nose? Doesn't matter, because the common misconception is this is not my, where am I at? This is not my eye socket. We have room to go up, okay? Again, not all of us are going to carve stacked faces this close. We're just doing it for repetition, and practice. We're just getting the form of that nose down. Like so, like so. And I promise you, I won't say like so every time. Just 2 more times. Like so, and like so. So now we can mark number 5. So that shows from step number 4 down to step number 5, we've created this nostril, and then we've created this up flare. So this is number 5. So now we're going to go fun with triangles. Create a pattern. Let's make a pattern. Anyway, again, not in toward the nose. I want to follow that same angle. Let me get to the angle. So I'm talking about this same angle we created. And I'm going to do a little bit of product placement here for you. Not specifically, but there was a question that I was answering the other day. This is an upsweep blade. All right. This is a straight blade. All right. When I'm carving right here and I'm trying to see the tip of my knife, I can see the tip of that upsweep knife even when it's like this. And I'm going to do that on the side. When I'm carving it down, I can see the tip of the knife even at that sharp angle. The end of that knife is the tip of my knife. However, where this blade goes down right here at the top, so when I'm carving like this and I turn my tool away from me, all I can see, well, I need another hand here almost. All I can see from this angle is about right there. And I'm going to pull my finger up, and there's 1/8 of an inch. So if you're finding yourself not missing or missing the mark on a triangle cut, you're either going to have to do one of 27 things. I won't list them all, but the easiest thing is carve triangles with an upsweep knife. The other one is move your carving up to where you can see the tip of the knife. Don't guess. Me and Blake's been picking on each other all afternoon because we're getting a little bit older. We were the young guys, 15 years ago when we were carving. Well, guess what? We're not anymore. So with an upsweep knife, we were talking about our eyesight getting a little bit worse than it was when we first started carving. So if you look at this, I'm going to use the upsweep knife. I'm going to carve these triangles out. Huh?
You're not even wearing glasses.
I'm not wearing my glasses, but I'm also, I'm telling you, I'm guessing on most of the stuff y'all, have seen me do in the last 10 minutes, I'm guessing. I'm actually about to move my light over here behind me. And see if I can move it over here. And hopefully it will not create too much of a glare. Let's see, we got some, that's a glare. Is that too much of a glare?
No, that looks
That's
good.
kind of redneck sounding. Man, I am from the South. All right, can y'all see a little bit better now?
Tom says yes.
Okay, cool. So now that I have light, I can see that I missed that cut right there. So again, me being lazy, I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to take all of these cuts on the side. It's going to be real quick. That one had a bit of fuzzy in there. And the reason I do this, I didn't start doing stuff this way to make study sticks. I started doing this stuff because remember when we were in school back in the day where you were lucky to get sentences because normally the principal would just wear your tail out with a slat of wood. So when I was lucky enough to get sentences, I never wrote out, "I will not talk in class." And y'all were shocked that I had to write that, right? I never had to, you know, I never got into the, well, I'm going to write this 300 times, one sentence at a time, because that would have made me learn my lesson. That would have took too long. However, if you just write "I" all the way down the page 200 times, and then you write "will" and so on and so forth, you can just crank through it. Well, you know, not only did that teach me how to write faster, it actually taught me, hey, I will never misspell "I will not talk in class" again, because I've done it consistently and repetitively. So the correct repetitive cuts, as opposed to coming in here and carving a nose, and then carving a nose, and then carving a nose, and then carving a nose, you're not learning anything because there's too many steps in carving a nose that you're going to pick up with consistency. So that was my thought on that. And so I have to be one of those back and forth people. You know, I jump around in my carvings, but every single carving is carved in a consistent way as to the way I carve. I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong, but that's how my brain operates. So now we're down here on carving number 6, or step number 6, and we'll just recap them real slow because this thing takes a minute to catch up. So one cut, the uppercut, step number 3, that looks like a weird, there's the up flare. Step number 4's got the top of the bridge of the nose. Then we're doing the side wings on the nostril. Then we're going deeper. Where are we at? We're going deeper with our triangle. Okay. So now that we're coming up on that was step number 6 complete. We're going to go up to step number 7. What we're going to do on step number 7 is we're going to get out a gouge. And whatever gouge you use is the correct gouge to use. We're going to go across the bridge of the nose and add a little bit of depth, like so. And how much depth do you add? You know, about that much. And again, it's entirely a preference thing. So we're going to come down here and we're just going to carve through each and every one of those, because we don't want a sharp line through there. We want a nice transition of the bridge of that nose, like so. And this, if you're carving cyclopses, like I guess a cyclops, because it's not plural, correct? Because it's only one. Again, if y'all weren't muted, man, y'all would just be laughing. That's like golden stuff right there. So if we look at this in slow motion from the profile, hold on, from the profile, you now see where we have, well, that's a little bit too close. We now have this profile going forward. So that's step number 7 which is just a simple cut. So with the same gouge or smaller, your choice, we're gonna make some nostrils. Blake tried to punch me, y'all. That's why I almost fell. I about died. So with the nostril, or with a gouge that fits the nose you're carving, I'm not picking on anybody, and I'll pick on myself. I've done a couple of magazine articles, and the magazine articles want us to say, hey, it's a 45-degree, 1/4 inch upsweep, extra lubricated blade. They want very detailed blades and gouges and cuts. But I've always been adamant about saying, use the tool that works for the carving you're doing it. Because, hey, guess what? What if I, blew that carving up or shrunk it down on a pattern on the, whatever, that copy machine. Yeah, the printing press. So use whichever gouge works for you. I've got about a 1/4 inch number 9, and it's close enough, but I'm going to go down 1 step and grab a little bit smaller gouge, because I want a little bit smaller nostril flare here. So grab whatever tool works for you. Now that we've came in originally starting this nose, and because we carved at a downward angle away from the nose, we now do not have to push this gouge at an upward angle. We can push it straight in, which is then going to give it the illusion that it's going up into that nostril. If we would have carved this straight in to get us any sort of arc in there, we now have to carve upward. You don't have a lot of wood there, and carving upward is where I constantly broke out the side of that nostril, and then I would say those 4-letter words like ouch and dang and stuff like that, because I broke that nose hole out. So y'all thought I was going to say something else, didn't you? So with that being said, I'm going to carve almost straight in. This is the only time you're going to cut straight in. And because we're lazy, we're just going to go down that one side, getting nice, consistent cuts all the way down through there. And I'm going to go back up this side, but I'm going to start and go down, because I don't want to accidentally cut this nostril and mess up my steps. Make sure I'm in angle there. So now that's all you need. But if you want to get extra fancy with this, and we do, we're now going to come back after I take this little fuzzy off right there. We're now going to come back, because we just have and that's step number 8. Whoops, that side don't write. That's step number 8. So now what I'm going to do on step number 9 is I'm going to cut a triangle in the very tip of that nose. What that's going to do is that's going to give you the illusion that there's more depth than there actually is. So now when you look at that, you see the depth and shadow we have versus that. Now I'm going to go down here and knock all these out. But again, me being lazy, I'm going to cut all of those sides. I'm going to cut all of these sides. And then we'll pop them out. Pop them out. Pop them out. Same way on this side, small triangle. My goal is to be in the center of the bottom of that hole, and I want to come out on the bottom side of the triangle, or the bottom side of the triangle where the nostril flare touches right here, and the upper part, or the other part, comes where it comes back toward the nose. So in other words, the top of this is going to start out as a nice number 9 degree gouge, and then the center of that's going to go down. And what that does is the ambient ray refracts off the light in such a manner that it causes an optical illusion to go down in there and create a vortex. Anybody?
Well, write that down.
All right, so now we've just completed number 9. Now, I told you we could have honestly went all the way around this and just carved a nose. You could make more steps if you want to. You can make less steps. You can say, hey, there's only 5 steps to a nose. You cut this side and cut that side, and then it's good. So step number 9, let's finish up. So we got 1, 2, 3. We got 3 more steps, and I need to do, well, look at there. I need to do 3 more things. I timed that pretty good. So what I want to do is whatever gouge you used, I want to come just above, let it refocus there. I want to come just above that nostril flare, and I want to go back into where my eye socket's going to be. So it's going to be like this, and then I'm going to come out. Again, that cut is in and up the side of the bridge of the nose, just above the nostril, up the side of the bridge of the nose, and out. And let me let that focus there. And you can see from this one, or this one, we got a little bit of trash from our original cut. You take it out and you're done. So same way, just above the nostril into where the eye socket's going to be and out. Like that. I got another one right there where our original cut line was. Let's get it going. Now, that's step number 10. Step number 11 is going to be opening up an eye socket a little bit larger. So you want to take something a little bit larger than what you got. I'm going to take the bottom of that. So I'm going to rob from this guy's chin. I'm going to come up and I'm going to come in and out, turning it upside down. Well, it's going to be down and out. So then you're going to create, where are we at here? It's the one with the fur hanging on the side of it. I'll get that fur off. But what it is you're coming down in beside the bridge of the nose and then outward. So that was step number 11. And again, the steps are just for my mental capacity to not carve something up here and get all mixed up. So same way here on carving the next one is you're going to come in here, in or down beside the bridge of the nose, down beside the bridge of the nose. We're just repeating step number 11, correct? So now when I want to create step number 12, I'm going to create the, I'm going to do 2 steps here. I'm going to take the V tool and I'm going to lay it on its side, and I'm going to get some of that cheek off, just, and it's minute, up to the side of the bridge of that nose on both sides. And what I'm doing is I'm pushing that cheek back just a little bit, and I'm going to take that smaller gouge again, and I'm going to go over the top. Well, I'm going to take the larger gouge first. I'm going to go over the top, robbing some from his chin. And when I go over the top of this eye mound, and then I'm going to separate right through the brow line, right through there. I'm going to remove that chip like so. A little bit of feathering, tickle cuts, whatever you call them. Now from this point, you have your, where are we at? Hold on, I got a booger there. I don't like it. It's got to go. It doesn't pay rent. Has to move out. There's another one right there. So with the bottom one said, there's your nose. If you don't like that nose, guess what you can do? You can go a little tiny bit deeper right there. Take the eyebrows back a little bit. Take the gouge back a little bit. Go across the bridge of the nose again. Recreate the eye sockets. And I'm doing this just to show you that even though if you practice, you can completely change the profile of your nose as you're doing it. You could even take a smaller gouge and go in there again and sink more of a profile in that nose create an eye socket back in there. And again, I did those couple extra steps just to show you there's always another face living behind the one you're carving. I did not come up with that. That's the late, great Tom Wolfe told me that many years ago. And it always stuck with me. Don't be afraid, because this is systematic carving. This is doing the same thing over to get the results you're looking for. Fluid carving is where you're just, I think I seen Jim Feather on earlier, and I'm not picking on him, but he, to me, is a fluid carver. He goes where it takes you. And I'm very much a fluid carver too, but you have to have the systematic properties of building your original idea into reality. With that being said, we've got another one. I don't know how we are on time.
We're 20 after. You got another 10 minutes.
You got another 10 minutes. Okay, so we're going to do, let's see what we can do in 10 minutes without me explaining everything. And I'll use this corner right here. So So at this point, I'm just going to do this guy right here. So we're not going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're just going to make some cuts. And as you notice, I'm just repeating the same cut over and over. So obviously there's going to be some step progressions in this guy here. Keeping in mind, we don't want to go too far over into this side. But again, if it's close, it's still going to look kind of cool because you don't want a whole bunch of wood mixed and matched into there. So I'm going to take this a little deeper. Like so. Take this one a little deeper. Am I in frame? All right. So 1/4 inch V tool. Everything above the iris gets carved upward. Everything below the iris gets carved downward. Never carve straight into an eyeball. You're creating a round shape, not a square that you're going to try to round later. You don't want a 1/2 inch circle in a 5/8 hole. You want that eyelid to be overwrapped. So, you know, carve upward. This is the top part of the eyelid. Step number 1, 1, 1. All these are at an upward angle. 1. Step number 1. Okay. Step number 2 is down and out, down and out, down and out, down and out. All right. To follow up step number 2, half of a cut, half of a cut, half of a cut, half of a cut. Step number 3 is complete the second part of the cut, which is down and out, down and out, and down and out. We're going to get rid of that stuff. You notice I'm not being in a hurry. I typically don't try to go back and get these till last. Step number 1, 2, 3, we're going to come across the bottom, slightly downward, back into itself. Step number 3, same cut. Step number 3, same cut. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Step number 4 is also going to give us the bottom eyelid, bottom eyelid. Step number 4 is also going to be a triangle cut. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to take both of the inside and outside of this. Now, I do not cut straight in there. That's going to create a box. Lay it back toward the center and go downward as you're cutting. And I'm taking out very small, minute cuts in here, angled back toward the center of the eye. I've had magazine articles that I have written myself, and the publisher called me and said, well, we need to know how much. Well, every time I read something and it said, take 1/4 inch out, my brain instantly thought, stab straight in and remove that chip. No, that chip needs to be laid way over here at the center of the eyeball. And notice I didn't say iris, because you can put that iris anywhere. Your main goal is you want a roundish shape. Same way here, above, even though I've got it upside down, above the iris goes up, below the iris goes down. And I'm talking if the iris is in the center. So think of the eyeball. There you go. Above the eyeball goes up, below the eyeball goes down. And by me not working and focusing on those chips as I carve them, I can carve them up in the detail part. And don't go digging at chips. Don't go picking. Don't go, you know, slide it one way or the other. Move the chip up and down with the tip of your knife. See which side it's hanging on and cut it. One of the worst things that I did, and it took me years to overcome, was I just kept going after that one chip. And the next thing I know, I mean, I'm carving an arm on the back of the kneecap because I just kept chasing something that wouldn't come out. Also, leave the vegetable brushes in the kitchen. Your wife may make you some stewed vegetables. You don't need vegetable brushes. Cut that mess out. On the fifth step here, I'm going to thin that eyebrow or eyelid on the top, like so. I'm also going to connect this on the bottom by creating a wedge cut right in there, which is going to have them overlapping like so. So now I can come back and I can say, well, I like this piece. I like this little study stick. I'm going to clean all the chips up. And I did that relatively fast. But when you're doing it yourself, by doing that systematic carving is going to give you more of an understanding on where and how that angle works, as opposed to carving one eye here, one eye here, one eye here, one eye here. So what you're doing is you're trying to be repetitive. So making your own study stick, in my opinion, and again, my opinion has been free today. So take that for what it's worth. In my opinion, creating your own study sticks gives you a lot of benefit. With that being said, I'm going to continue carving this piece. I'll probably put some ears on it. I may have enough room to do a progression of a mouth on the bottom, and I'll do something crazy on the top of this. But at that point, I think we got a couple more minutes left. If you want to bid on this guy, all this money is going to go back to the International Woodcarvers Association, and it will be wood burned and all that stuff. So with the steps on it. With that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Blake or Tom, unless anybody has any questions real quick.
Talk about your class and when they can find you.
The upcoming class in April, if everybody wants to write this down, you can contact me at DAGWOOD_76@yahoo.com. That is Dagwood_76@yahoo.com. I will send you the information as far as dates, times, price, material. This will be cut from a cutout, not a rough out. He is about 8 inches tall. Hold on, let me not lie to anybody. He's 5 inches that way. He's 8 inches that way. So he's 8 inches tall. You'll need a 3x3 block of wood, and also all these accessories will be shown. So I'm not just carving a pirate and leaving you with it. I've made a pattern for the knife, the sword, and the base. And I will provide all the information in an email. If you just put in the subtitle Pirate Class, and I will send you the Word document. It's got all the information on it.
And just so you know, everything will be linked in the YouTube description as well.
You can also find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Carving Friends that I run. I've got a Facebook page, which is Dwayne Gosnell Woodcarving Studio. You can also find my work at some of the various sites out there, to include the Caricature Carvers of America Facebook page. I'm also available on Instagram, and I'm also available on my website, which has a link to my email. That is dgosnellwoodcarving Dwayne.com. That's all one word, D Gosnell Woodcarving. And you can also type in Dwayne Woodcarving or some sort of Google search in it. Dwayne Gosnell rough outs. It'll get you to my main page. There's also a contact link in there that goes directly to my email. If there's any of you guys who gets on today, tomorrow, next week, and it says sold out of something, as far as castings, they will be reordered. Just like we talked about earlier, some weather conditions are present this morning. So I do have some on hand right now, but it'll probably be tomorrow afternoon before I get to cast some more.
Good job, Beaver.
That sounded like Rich.
Ah, good class. Good
Thanks,
demo.
sir.
All right, guys. While Dwayne mutes there so that we don't have feedback, I want to thank everybody again for joining us today. Dwayne, thank you for putting in the time to do this. Thanks for the giveaway as far as the auction piece. And I think at this point it's $110. We'll go ahead and call last bid. Anybody who wants to bid another time on this, go ahead and put your bid in the chat. Otherwise, we're going to cut it off at 110, and whoever has that bid needs to stay after the meeting so that we can gather your information. Want to remind you all again what we have coming up on the meetings. Next weekend, we'll have Rich Embling coming on talking about marionettes. That'll be March 6th. We'll have Mary May from Mary May's School of Traditional Woodcarving. That'll be on March the 13th. Janet Cordell will be on with us on March the 20th. James Ray Miller will be back with us on March the 27th. Tim Crawford from Chip Chats and the National Woodcarvers Association will be on with us at the beginning of April. And we have Alec Lacoste, Bruce and Kenny, and a few other people that's lined up that'll take us through April and the beginning of May. So we have quite a few good classes and meetings coming up in the future. Again, make sure that you go over to our YouTube page and subscribe there. Like the videos. Looks like we got another bid of $120. We'll leave this on for just another second more. But join us again next time where we'll have Rich Embling coming on talking about marionettes. And we thank you all for joining us today. And we'll see you all next week on International Association of Woodcarvers. Thank you all.